Number 10. Baby Inheritors. We've gone into the Spider-Verse multiple times in the comics now, and we are about to go back again. Supposedly one last time. We'll see what happens. But I'm sure nothing can top the weirdness of how the last Spider-Man multiversal crossover ended. In the first Spider-Verse in the comics, the Inheritors were the group of villains that the Spider Totems of the multiverse had to band together to fight. At the end of that event, they defeated them, but then oddly enough, they returned again via Superior Spider-Man, aka Otto Octavius' tech. The Inheritors managed to clone themselves and make a comeback in Spider-Geddon, once more uniting the Spider Army to come together and defeat their threat to the multiverse. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires who specifically prey on animal or insect-inspired totemic beings, like Spider Totems. Spider Totems are basically people across the multiverse with spider-like powers and abilities who were destined to become spider-themed heroes and protect their world. At the end of Spider-Geddon, the Inheritors are defeated by being turned into baby versions of themselves and given to Spider-Man, Aunt May of Earth 3123, to raise to be good. Because that's how you defeat villains sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta raise them yourself. Number 9. Feed me plasma. One of the weirdest things, especially here on the internet, is everyone's obsession with Morbius feeding on plasma and not human blood. I mean, the amount of times I've talked about Morbius drinking blood and people on the internet have been like, actually it's plasma. It's an insane amount. People really love the plasma. This doesn't actually come from the comics though, but instead is something that grew out of the Spider-Man animated series. And it came to be thanks to censorship, of course, like with so many weird things that we have, because isn't that just always the way? Morbius, being a vampire on basically a children's animated series, wasn't allowed to be shown feeding on blood because it was considered too violent. So instead they had Morbius thirst for plasma. That way you can get around the whole blood thing, although plasma of course it's in blood. Plasma is the liquid portion of your blood that contains mainly water as opposed to the other portions of your blood, which is primarily made up of red and white blood cells as well as platelets. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list here and you are loving what we do on the channel, please head on over to Facebook. You can follow us there and we have more exciting content coming your way and some exclusive things planned for you in the future, we hope. Number 8. Fin Fang Foom's diaper. Speaking of censorship, I have another strange one for you. This one comes from the comics, and we have the Comics Code Authority to thank for it, of course. Thanks, CCA. Thank you so much. Fin Fang Foom is a dragon that is well known in the comics. Recently in the MCU, we actually thought Fin Fang Foom might appear in Shang-Chi based on merch, only to learn that the dragon there was actually instead known as the Great Protector, so that was not Fin Fang Foom. In the comics, I recently saw Fin Fang Foom in the pages of Marauders, where he pops up before the original team dissolved, with Iceman actually fighting Foom before deciding to take a vacation from his work on the team, eventually leaving the Marauders completely once they rebooted that series. Well, I mean, at least he's gone for now. Bobby might be back later, but for now, he's out. Fin Fang Foom has years of history, and a good chunk of those years he spent in a purple diaper. Why? Because the CCA was worried about the dragon's indecent exposure. I'm not joking here, guys. That's what they were like. They're like, he's gotta wear pants. He's up there, he's naked. And it is for the reason of dragon modesty that he was forced to wear his iconic purple diaper or boxers or shorts, depending on, of course, who's drawing him and, you know, how you, as the person reading and looking at the comic, want to interpret that garment that he was forced into wearing. Number 7. Spider Bite. I am so happy that I get to talk about Spider Bite. She was actually my favorite spider-themed hero to appear in the Vault of Spiders comic, and she's also definitely a weirdo in the best of ways. She hails from a world where people actually spend most of their time online as avatars, which is pretty weird. Spider Bite is actually Margot's avatar, or one of them rather, that she wears in the digital space. She fights to protect people in cyberspace by donning her Spider Bite persona and apprehending cyber criminals. Seriously though, how cool would it be if we actually had a hero like this on, you know, the internet, on cyberspace? Although this might seem like a strange reality to some, the cool thing about Spider Bite is it kind of feels like she could exist in our own future. I mean, already people spend a lot of time online and we have things like VR, Oculus, and even digital land. So this could very well be our own future. Honestly, we maybe need some vigilantes on the internet. Number 6. Doppelganger. Doppelganger Doppelganger is known for being one of the most vicious and evil spider people out there. He was actually created initially during the Infinity War event by the evil version of Adam Warlock, known as Magus. During that event, many different heroes had to fight against their evil alternate selves or fight against the evil alternate versions of fellow heroes and friends. Doppelganger was one of these, but despite being killed during Infinity War, he still managed to reappear again in the comics, returning in Maximum Carnage and wreaking havoc every time he manages to pretty much pop up, which happens actually surprisingly often when you consider how many times in different ways he's actually died over the years, but he's still kicking. Number 5. Ghost Spider. I feel like some people are going to be offended by some of the spider folks I'm calling weird on this list, but I would like to take this time to remind you that weird doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, weird to me usually tends to be a good thing. Usually, weird to me just means something that is extreme or unique in some way, something that stands out. And standing out, honestly, it can be quite a good thing. In fact, in Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider's case, I feel like her being weird is a big part of the reason why I love her character, and why I think a lot of us love her character. In almost every other universe, Gwen Stacy tragically dies, and is actually a huge part of a staple canon event for most Peter Parkers or Spider-Men out there. But in her home reality of Earth 65, things were different. Instead of her dying, it's Peter who becomes the Lizard, and he dies. And this is surprisingly rare. There are very few realities where Gwen even gets to stay alive. Primarily, I can only think of House of M and Gwenpool's home reality off the top of my head. So in the sense of standing out, Ghost Spider truly is a lovable weirdo, as the girl that not only lived, but herself also becomes a spider-themed hero. Pretty cool. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of my favorite alternate versions of Spider-Man. If you thought Spider-Man was creepy, wait till you meet this guy. Patton Parnell is the Spider-Man of Earth 51412. In this reality, Patton stands in for Peter, but instead of being a good guy, he's kinda just a creepy guy who enjoys making ants burn on the sidewalk with a magnifying glass as part of his experiments. However, Patton is likely a sadistic and creepy person because he actually has a pretty rough home life, often being mistreated by his Uncle Ted. In the end, when he receives his powers, they turn him into a monstrous, more evil spider-like creature, who ends up mutating into something more monster than man. This version of Spider-Man has only ever made his first and last appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue number 4 from 2014. Though honestly, I would love to see more versions of Patton popping up around the world. He's pretty cool. Number 3. Bagman. Bagman is an interesting character. Although many of us consider him to be an alternate thanks to the costume's appearance in events like the Spider-Verse and properties like Marvel's Spider-Man, where this is one of the costumes you can roam around the city in the comics, this was only really a moment in Peter's life, at least in the main continuity of Earth 616. Bagman's origins come from the time when Peter went to Reed Richards for help with his black costume, which it turned out was actually the symbiote Venom, and after being separated from the Venom symbiote, used this outfit as a temporary replacement costume. It was made up of a fantastic suit loaned to him from Johnny Storm's The Human Torch and a paper bag, which had 2 holes cut out for eyes that he would wear over his head. Bagman's appearance throughout Spider-Verse content, however, implies that somewhere out there exists a world where Spider-Man never stopped wearing the Bagman outfit. Although, we've never visited that world, but I would love to. At least I don't think we have. Number 2. Miles Morales Animated Spider-Verse Trilogy. The Miles Morales of Into the Spider-Verse has a somewhat different origin story, as we learn in the latest film in the trilogy, Across the Spider-Verse. Mild, I would say pretty mild, spoilers ahead for those who have yet to see the film, as that's the Miles we are going to be focusing on here. So we're not focusing on comic book 1610, we're going to be focusing on animated universe Miles from Earth 1610. The one from Sony's animated multiverse, if you will. But at the same time, I'm going to try and keep this more general and avoid getting too specific, so hopefully this will be quite a mild spoiler if you want to listen that won't ruin the movie for you at all. At least that's what I'm hoping. Hope I'm not ruining the movie for anyone. That would make me sad. And Across the Spider-Verse, we learn that Miles' origin is actually unique in the sense that it connects him to another reality. This is interesting and unique for his origin story and makes him more of a standout or odd, weird, you might say, character when it comes to the fact that technically he could be considered the Spider-Man of a different reality than his native one of Earth 1610. I found that very interesting, and I think it makes him kind of weird in a great way. in an intriguing way. Number 1. Bagman. If you thought Bagman was weird, wait till I tell you about Bagman. Yep, you heard that right. You remember Spider-Man? If you aren't familiar with her, a quick recap for you. She is an alternate reality spider-themed hero where instead of Peter Parker ending up with spider-like powers and abilities after being bitten by a radioactive spider, May Parker, his aunt, receives them instead after she was bitten while delivering a forgotten lunch to Peter while he was on a field trip at school. In this reality, May Parker is the hero known as Spider-Man, with Peter and Ben being part of her crime-fighting team and offering her support in terms of tech know-how and heart. Bagman appears as one of the alternates in the 2019 Spider-Verse comic in issue number 2 that Spider-Man reached out to get help from, reaching across the multiverse in order to defeat an evil alternate version of herself who was actually Carnage, an alternate Carnage, and an alternate May Parker.
And it's Bat Baby. In Batman number 147, published in 1962, we are introduced to Bat Baby, offering a glimpse into the distinctiveness of Batman during the Silver Age of comics. Contrasting the modern portrayal of Batman as a brooding and conflicted loner, this story reveals a peculiar side of the Caped Crusader. The narrative unfolds as Batman and Robin infiltrate a criminal hideout, initially gaining the upper hand. However, the criminals manage to escape when their mad scientist deploys a de-aging ray on Batman, basically think sky-high pacifier, regressing him into a 4-year-old child. Remarkably though, Batman retains his adult intellect and physical strength. Rather than being dismayed by this transformation, Bruce embraces it, donning a miniaturized cape, cowl, and Batman-themed overalls to become Bat Baby. The criminals attempted to ridicule him, but Bat Baby uses his enhanced abilities to foil their plans. So yeah, it is worth noting that de-aging superheroes was a curious trend in this era as well, with characters like Superboy and Wonder Girl being popular variations of Superman and Wonder Woman. However, this takes that to a literal extreme. The concept of a baby Bruce Wayne fighting crime did not have lasting popularity, and Bat Baby remains a singular appearance in DC Comics, which was in Batman number 147. But I think we can all kind of appreciate that. In at 9, Satan Batman. In this future incarnation, Damian Wayne assumes the role of Batman following the demise of the second Batman. Possessing supernatural abilities and the willingness to take lives, Damian believed that resorting to lethal methods was necessary to combat crime, setting him apart from any other members of the Bat family. Despite the efforts of Father James Gordon and Alfred to guide him towards a different path, Damian remained steadfast in his convictions. A heated argument with his father resulted in Damian severely injuring him with a dangerously close stab wound, leading to his expulsion from the Batcave by Alfred. During his tenure as Batman, Damian faced a formidable adversary in the form of Michael Lane, the former Azrael, driven by an unhinged obsession to destroy Batman under the influence of Simon Hurt. As chaos engulfed the planet, Gotham became a quarantine city overrun by Joker-affected inhabitants, and Talia al Ghul, Damian's mother, ordered the city's annihilation through a nuclear strike authorized by Simon Hurt, who had risen to the highest echelons of the American government. Remarkably, Damian survived the cataclysmic blast due to a pact he had made with Dr. Hurt, so I don't know what Simon was thinking, really, okay? He didn't think that one through. In at 8, Dark Claw. Logan Wayne is a combination of Bruce Wayne and Logan, being first introduced in Marvel vs. DC number 3. At 5 years old, after witnessing his parents' death at the hands of an armed robber, Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Alberta, Canada. All hail the North! His uncle was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, basically the Canadian FBI, and was ambushed and killed by poachers a short time after Logan's arrival in Canada. After the death of his uncle, Logan was sent to live in a home run by nuns, and as soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Logan was submitted to the Weapon X project, after that, the Canadian Super Soldier program, and it was here that Logan had adamantium bonded to his bones and learnt of his meta-mutant nature. And since this is an amalgam, they are both considered metas and mutants because that's basically the same thing between the universes. The Weapon X project was terminated due to its dual failure. Logan was ineffective because he actually had a conscience, but this didn't stop him from being pretty damn bad. Having all the powers of Logan, as well as things like the Clawcopter and Clawmobile, and I'm not even kidding, this is in essence a superpowered Batman, which I think we all should know is pretty dope. Although I wonder if he has a Claw credit card.
Number 7. Superior Spider-Man. What if one of Spider-Man's greatest foes became Spider-Man himself? Well, we know what happens because this actually has happened. Actually a few times in the comics. Now, one of the most memorable and strangest occurrences of this was when Spider-Man actually traded bodies with Dr. Octopus. You know, I've short formed that name so much in recent years that it actually feels weird to say his whole supervillain title name now, Dr. Octopus. Why does that feel so weird? Otto at the time was on his deathbed, and in an attempt to save his mind and preserve it, managed to trick Peter into swapping bodies with him. Initially, Doc Ock just wanted to use Peter's younger body to save himself, and actually had no interest in taking Peter's place. However, as Peter in Otto's body lay on now his deathbed, because they'd swapped bodies and he was in Otto's failing body, he managed to convince Otto that the world needed Spider-Man, and to take up the mantle and continue what Peter had started when he became Spider-Man years ago. Otto surprised us all by actually agreeing, vowing to act as a hero, and to even do better than Peter had, dubbing himself Superior Spider-Man, which honestly, that last part, not so surprising for Otto Octavius. Although ultimately, Otto wouldn't necessarily do better, he wouldn't necessarily be a better Spider-Man. Some very interesting things came out of this massive storyline, and there are still some people that argue that Superior Spider-Man is better, so I mean, I guess that's for you, the reader, to decide. Number 6. Spider-Boy. What happens when you take Connor Kent's Superboy and mix him with Peter Parker's Spider-Man? You get Spider-Boy. Spider-Boy is one of those rare and amazing creations that came out of the days of Amalgam Comics. For those who are unfamiliar with Amalgam Comics, it was a magical joint comic line that existed between both DC Comics and Marvel Comics. These two publishers came together to combine their worlds, mashing up heroes and stories to give us new characters who were inspired by their roster of superheroes and supervillains from each of their unique multiverses. Spider-Boy, as such, is one of those characters. Spider-Boy was a clone who was created by Project Cadmus to be a duplicate of the Amalgam Universe's Super Soldier, but with the added ability to manipulate gravity. Peter Parker was the scientist who was in charge of creating this clone, but he died during the process after his project was basically sabotaged. As a result, the clone created was much younger than intended. He was named Pete after his creator by General Thaddeus Ross, who was overseeing this project. Unfortunately, Ross, who Pete came to know as his Uncle Jen, was killed by a mugger. As a result, Pete lamented his young age, as this had made the mugger dismiss him and focus on Ross. Spider-Boy vowed from that day on to become undismissible, so all criminals would focus on him instead of innocent bystanders. Number 5. Spider-Man. Another one of my favorite alternate spider weirdos is Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man spun out of a what-if story, which aimed to answer the question, what if Aunt May had been bitten by a radioactive spider? The question we were all, I'm sure, itching to know the answer to at the time. This first happened to May in issue number 23 of the 1977 What If series. May was basically bringing Peter his lunch, which he had forgotten at home, when she was the one who ended up being bitten by the radioactive spider in his place. In May's reality, both Peter and Ben are still alive and well and actually act as her allies, while she fights to protect New York and stop criminals in their tracks. Kinda like a cute little family team. I love it. Number 4. Japanese Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, as he is also sometimes known. Japanese Spider-Man is very different from the one we know in North America. In Japan, Spider-Man actually had his own TV show, but with that he also got a radically different backstory. It's really wild and really great. If you think you know Spider-Man, you likely will be very surprised by this version of Spider-Man. Spider-Man here is Takayuya Yamashiro, who got his spider-like abilities from a dying alien. Along with these abilities, he was also given Leopardon, a giant robot mech spaceship. Yep. The alien who gave him his abilities is named Garia, and actually hails from another world known as Planet Spider. Prior to becoming the hero Spider-Man, and even after, Yamashiro was known for being a talented motocross racer. Also, the intro for the 1970s show is still one of my all-time favorite intros I've ever probably heard in the existence of television intros, and I honestly still think it slaps today. Number 3. Spider-Ham. This version of Spider-Man is actually a web-slinging cartoon pig. Spider-Ham hails from a reality that is similar to the Toontown we see in the classic film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Physics aren't really the same as our world, but instead are reimagined to be kinda wacky like how they are in classic cartoons. I don't know about you, but to me, this has always made Spider-Man Spider-Ham not only seem like one of the weirdest variants around, but also kind of one of the most powerful just because of that. Because I feel like if you have tuned physics, like, watch out. Spider-Ham's civilian name is Peter Porker, and he hails from the reality designated number 8311. In Spider-Ham's origin story, he actually started out as a spider, but after being bitten by a radioactive sort of rage-fueled pig named May Porker, who actually was a scientist simply trying to try out an atomic-powered hairdryer at the time, which went awry and kind of put her into a fit of rage, he was transformed into a pig. This is the true story. Despite being turned into a pig, he still kept all of his spider-like abilities and powers, hence Spider-Ham. Number 2, Widow, aka Spider-Horse. Although if you look up Spider-Horse on Google, you might actually get a different character before you get Widow. But editorial speaking, Spider-Horse is still a name that is used with this character, so I'm still mentioning it here because I still think it's relevant, and I like saying Spider-Horse. Remember when I was telling you about web-slinger Patrick O'Hara living in the Wild Wild West times? Well, he's not the only one who receives spider-like abilities. No, no, no. His horse was also bitten by the same elixir-doused radioactive spider. And guess what? He got powers too. Widow is Patrick O'Hara's loyal steed, who also became a spider-like hero and even was recruited alongside Webslinger to join the Web Warriors and fight against the Inheritors during the Spider-Verse event. Spider-Horse is also one of the Spider-Man variants we see or will see in Across the Spider-Verse. Fun facts. At least it seems like we'll see him. He's in the trailer, so I feel like he's gonna be in there. Number 1, Spidey Super Stories. I love this one. The Electric Company actually brought us the first ever live action depiction of Spider-Man, if you can believe that, with their Spidey Super Stories skits. In these skits, Spider-Man was portrayed by puppeteer and dancer Danny Seagren. This version of Spider-Man never spoke, but instead acted out his intentions that were communicated by a narrator who told the story. Fun fact, Morgan Freeman was actually one of the actors who had narrating credits for these skits, so if you go back and listen to some of them, you might hear his very familiar voice. He was a member of the Electric Company cast, so that's why you will hear that. In these stories, Spider-Man took on villains like Dr. Fly and Spoiler. Spoiler was all about ruining things for folks, hence his name, Spoiler. He likes to spoil things. Dr. Fly, on the other hand, was a half-human, half-mutant who wanted to transform everyone on the planet into a mutant like he was. All of these villains were so strange and so great, and you should go back and watch some of these skits because they're pretty fantastic.
Coming in at number 10 today is the Hulk. Now just hold on a sec before you get up in arms. Everyone knows the Hulk's ability to turn into a big old green monster and rip things apart with a strength that increases based on his anger. But what many of you may not know is that Hulk actually possesses a much more subtle ability to see astral projections and ghosts and even interact with them if he chooses to. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender, but why does Hulk even have this ability in the first place? Well, Bruce Banner subconsciously feared his father's ghost would come back to haunt him, like literally come back to haunt him. And so, the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost. There isn't really more to it, that's just kind of it. Hulk just developed the ability that is something usually reserved for telepaths and magic users. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's actually been suggested that for Bruce, the clarity of the astral forms are diminished when compared to the telepathically resistant Hulk's ability to view them. With Immortal Hulk and the connection to the One Below All, perhaps that could serve as some kind of fan explanation, but that's all we got. Number 9, Dupe. This bumpy looking lima bean is and was basically the mascot of a bunch of different mutant teams in Marvel Comics, while also low-key being one of the heaviest hitters around. Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone can somehow understand. According to Captain America, the US government created him in a secret weapons project and he was instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. But then, apparently, he also comes from a place called Marginalia, quote, the world between worlds and place that begins where the story ends. Which is basically to say that we don't actually know where he comes from for sure. The most surprising thing about Dupe though is his list of powers. It is long. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he has blinding speed, size alteration, energy projection, psionic fire, blasts and shields, he can perform quote, dupish magic and has the power of the funk. Oh, and Dupe's body also contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupeland, and he is able to access that by turning himself inside out. It's not just Dupe's powers that are weird, it's literally the whole package. He's weird. Number 8. Hindsight Lad. To be completely candid here, Hindsight Lad's powers are not actual powers, but he acts like they are, and that means I'm gonna talk about it. Carton Lefroy was a nuisance before he ever became Hindsight Lad, but when he found out that his neighbor, Robbie Baldwin, was Speedball of the New Warriors, he threatened to reveal Robbie's secret identity unless Robbie let him be a part of the team. And he actually managed to prove very useful, and did have some tactical ability which eventually got him fully put on the team. He kind of became their guy in the chair, but that's because his self-given power was the power of hindsight. The power to look back at all the superhero fights that he's been a part of and analyze them, quote unquote, and now with the present hindsight, he can tell the heroes what they should have tried differently, which in his mind meant they can now go prepare for that exact same scenario if it plays out again, which in a comic book, that's probably not gonna happen. Just saying.
And at 7, the Cloud. After joining the Defenders, Cloud struggled with understanding their true origins. Complicating matters, they developed feelings for their teammate Moondragon, who was subtly using telepathic signals to manipulate others. Cloud's confusion led them to shapeshift into Danny Milligan's form, hoping to be a more suitable form for Moondragon, but this adds to the mystery surrounding Cloud's identity and just life in general, because they are a freaking cloud that will shapeshift into naked humans. In time, Cloud regained their complete memories and led the Defenders on a space mission to prevent the Star Thief from harming their family, and with their memories restored, Cloud embraced their rightful place in the cosmos, finding clarity and purpose once again. Most recently, now preferring the pronoun they, Cloud reappeared as a member of Doctor Strange's new Defenders. While the Defenders were in the 4th cosmos, Cloud stayed behind and journeyed into the mystery. Cloud then encountered a new version of the Defenders as they were traveling through the mystery, specifically the land of couldn't be, shouldn't be. And at 6, the Creeper. Jack Ryder, a former resident of Gotham City, finds himself fired from his political talk show when he fearlessly criticized his sponsors and refused to back down. Recognizing his detective skills, Chief of Network Security Bill Brain offered Ryder a job as an investigator. Ryder's first assignment involved locating Dr. Yatz, a scientist captured by a local gangster, Angel Devlin, who is collaborating with communist powers. To infiltrate Devlin's masquerade party, Ryder seeks a disguise at a costume shop where he improvises a unique outfit with yellow lights, green trunks, red gloves and boots, with yellow makeup, a green wig. It's really weird. He even has like a sheepskin rug as a cape. Ryder completes his bold ensemble, and then at the party he confronts Devlin's henchmen and rescues Dr. Yatz, but not without being injured. In a twisted turn of fate though, Dr. Yatz injects Ryder with a chemical serum that enhances his healing, strength, and stamina, but also implants a tiny device under his skin capable of rearranging molecular structures and rendering his suit basically invisible until needed. But the comic explanation is that he can switch between his skin and his costume that he wore to the party at will, which is all kinds of strange. Halfway through into number 5, Ultra Boy. Jonah, known as Ultra Boy and hailing from the planet of Rimbor, is a member of the Legion of Superheroes with a wide array of powers, but he can only use one of them at a time due to his physical limitations. Originally, Joe was part of a gang called the Emerald Dragons on the seedy world of Rimbor. While traveling in his space speedster, not that kind of speedster, he was swallowed by an energy blast, a monstrous whale-like creature that devoured any life form in its path. Luckily, the Galactic Patrol cruiser saved him by cutting open the creature with a ray, but the radiation charged Joe's body, granting him incredible abilities like X-ray vision and more. Embracing his newfound powers, he became Ultra Boy and joined law enforcement efforts, leading him to be recommended for the Legion of Superheroes. At some point, Joe was thrown back in time to the 20th century and teamed up with Superboy, merging their minds to become Reflecto, but eventually he returned to the 30th century and continued his adventures as Ultra Boy. And at 4, Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze's parents were famous motorcycle stars alongside Craig Crash Simpson, who became like a father figure to Johnny after their death. Taught by Crash, Johnny was expected to carry on the legacy, but he resisted, disappointing his girlfriend Roxanne. When Crash fell terminally ill, Johnny delved into the occult and in desperation to save him. He unwillingly summoned Mephisto, whom he struck a deal with to cure Crash's cancer in exchange for his eternal servitude in hell. Despite the deal though, Crash died shortly after, attempting a dangerous stunt. Grieving and seeking to honor his foster father, Johnny attempted the same stunt but nearly lost his soul to Mephisto, and then he becomes Ghost Rider. Getting close to the end, in number 3, Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer. Van Crawford, a wealthy owner of hobby shops and a hobby expert, stumbled upon a crashed flying saucer one day. To show gratitude for his assistance, the shape-shifting alien inside granted Van a drink that tasted like a chocolate milkshake, but was actually the substance used by the alien's race to transform into saucers. Now, possessing that same power, Van adopted the persona of Fat Man and fought evil with his newfound abilities. Along the way, he gained a teenage sidekick of Tin Man, who could coat himself in tin because of magic, and Fat Man's adventures led him to become the temporary king of Octagonia, a title obtained by spending $25,000, oblivious to the actual nature of the acquisition. If you're gonna be called Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer and your only power is to turn into a flying saucer and you're other than that just rich? Weird. But ultimately, in at number 2, Doorman. Dermar Davis, an ordinary American youth, experienced a personal tragedy when his mother passed away during his college years. After completing his education, Dermar responded to Dr. Immortal's call for costumed adventurers to form a team, leading him to join the Great Lakes Avengers. As a mutant with a remarkable teleportation ability, he became an invaluable asset to the team, providing them with stealthy entrances and surprising attacks by creating openings into almost any structure. And the reason that this is weird is because, like, yeah, sure, he's a mutant, but a mutant that can become a door? That's weird even by mutant standards. There's a dude covered in eyeballs, for God's sakes. Doorman is a class 10 teleporter. Okay, and if you're confused as to what that means, his body is a portal to the Dark Force dimension, allowing for people or items to pass through him and walk through any solid object that the Doorman is standing against. When creating a door through an object, Doorman is often surrounded by floating black spheres that create an outline of his body and like on the opposite side of any object, so they kind of know where they're coming through. But becoming a mutant that turns into doors? Yeah. And finally, in at number 1, Hindsight Lad. Initially met with skepticism by the other New Warriors, Hindsight Lad proved his value when he rescued the team from the clutches of the Poison Memories. Utilizing Speedball's address book, he teamed up with the Night Thrasher to mount a successful rescue mission wherein the core members were captured and sent through time by the Sphinx. With the original New Warriors missing, Hindsight Lad and Bandit formed a new team of heroes called the New Warriors. Carlton LaForge, a computer nerd and misfit, discovered his neighbor Robbie Baldwin's secret identity as Speedball during an apartment crisis caused by Darkling's Dark Force. Carlton, a superhero enthusiast with no powers, demanded to join the team or he would expose Robbie. Reluctantly, Speedball and the New Warriors agreed, and Carlton officially became Hindsight Lad, who has no powers except the power of hindsight, being able to look back and say what they could have done differently.
Number 10, Kraven the Spider Hunter. We know on Earth 8 there is a Spider Woman who happens to resemble Kraven somewhat, but did you know that on Earth 31 there actually is a Sergei Kravenov who simply is Spider-Man? Yep, Kraven is known as Hunter Spider, who after being exposed to a giant spider's spider venom while hunting a lion in Zimbabwe, became himself a spider-themed hero. Hunter Spider specifically focuses on hunting spider-themed villains in New York City. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, if you love it when we talk about alternate spider folks, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. I know there's a bunch of you out there that aren't subscribed, and if that's who you are, maybe subscribe. It's a nice thing to do. Helps us out. Number 9, Spider. Spider. Penny Parker's story is really just strange. I mean, even her superhero name is pretty strange. SP//DR. Penny Parker hails from the reality of Earth 14512. Here she pilots a mech that is connected to her through her genes and a spider bite. The spider bite connects her to the suit, as the spider that bit her actually makes up half of the mech suit known as Spider's CPU. In her alternate reality, she also has a rival in Addie Brock, who ends up as the pilot of the mech suit known as Venom, or as it's spelled there, VEN #M, or £, if you prefer. Penny is weird in the sense that a lot of her story, while still echoing the canon, feels like such a fresh take on the origin of Spider-Man, which is also why I love it. Number 8, the Spider. On Earth 15, Spider-Man is the exact opposite of a hero. He is a villain, a criminal, and one of the most extreme kinds of criminals, a serial killer. He merged with a symbiote that is basically Carnage to become the Spider. His sense of humor is extremely dark, and he actually takes joy in hurting others. Despite joining the Timebreakers, the Spider later tries to take over multiple different universes and ends up being killed during his attempt. So while he is really creepy and disturbing, at least he's gone now. Or at least he's gone for now. The Spider was one of the characters and teammates that appeared in Exiles, making his first appearance in the 2001 Exiles series in issue number 12, but eventually was killed in issue number 44. While we know about Peter Parker and his role as the Spider on Earth 15 as a serial killer with a symbiotic suit, we don't really know anything else about his home reality. So yeah, I wonder if all the other heroes are also villains there.
At number 7 is New Avengers Illuminati. This is originally known as a one-off storyline, but it's become known as the origin to how the now popular Illuminati were formed in the context of Marvel. And it's still a surprise to most readers that it ended up actually working, mainly because it features so many heavy hitters that it's hard to imagine how they'd all cooperate with one another. Originally formed to feature all the smartest minds in Marvel, the Illuminati also seemed like a weird move to add yet another superhero team to Marvel's roster, with Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, Black Panther, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, Namor, and Yellow Jacket. It's hard to imagine that this group actually gelled and didn't get written off as too overpowered. But it's actually become one of the cult favorite superhero groups in all of Marvel and DC Comics, which is fun to see because otherwise these characters don't really have much business appearing in the same storyline, let alone the same room as one another. At number 6 we have Superman Red Sun. This storyline is a weird one in that it tells the story of Superman being a Soviet hero, with his ship having crash landed in Soviet Ukraine rather than Kansas, with Lex Luthor being the president of the United States and Superman's childhood love being replaced by a Soviet party member named Lana Lazarenko. It initially appears to just be a story of what-ifs set in the Cold War era. Superman finds himself at the helm of the US-Russia conflict with President Luthor, which escalates in a similar fashion to the actual events of the Cold War. On top of all this, we also see an anti-revolutionary Batman trying to avenge his parents' death at the hand of the secret police, which all just seems super bizarre and convoluted at first. But what ends up making this storyline stand out as one of the more iconic and celebrated DC storylines is how it offers commentary to real international conflicts in the modern world. Published in 2005, it doesn't quite speak to these issues as they are today, but it does remind us how complicated and long-winded the tensions between the East and the West have been. At number 5 is Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne. This storyline is a really fun one and is only weird because of how unusual the adventure is for Bruce Wayne. The story starts after the events of Final Crisis when Batman is zapped by Darkseid's Omega beams and sent back to the Paleolithic era, aka the Stone Age. He then has to fight his way through every different epoch of human history until he gets to the present, influencing the world around him as he goes. For example, he inadvertently starts a bat-worshipping cult in the Stone Age, which he then finds artifacts of during his time fighting Blackbeard in the 18th century. The Grant Morrison story really adds a lot to the mythology of Batman as well, and much of it has become canon, like Batman's 17th century ancestor Nathaniel Wayne. The story itself could be considered pretty strange, seeing as it begins in a caveman setting, but the depth of the adventure and the place it ends up really makes this weird story actually work really well. At number 4 we have Vision Volume 2. Released in 2015, this storyline explores the story of Vision trying to find purpose in life through the pursuit of a nuclear family. With a wife and 2 kids, they become the android family on the block and for the most part deal with pretty mundane human problems. At least at first. When this first came out, it may have struck readers as being a little too strange to actually work, but there is more depth to this 12-part maxi series than was first expected of it. In choosing to create his own family, Vision seems to be adjusting the protocol instilled in him by his creator Ultron. Instead of pursuing something of a set purpose, like Ultron's proposition of cleansing the Earth of humanity, Vision wants to set off on a pursuit of the unobtainable, which he deems to be the essence of freedom. And in the case of this series, that unattainable goal seems to be the American dream. This series ended up being so influential that it's one of the main inspirations for the hit Disney Plus series WandaVision. At number 3 is House of X and the Powers of X. This storyline chronicles the events of X-Men creating their own nation-state on an island called Krakoa. This utopian society is meant to be only inhabited by mutants and is led by Professor X, Magneto, and Apocalypse. Not only does this island allow mutants to live beyond the controlling grips of humanity, but it also allows them to come back to life upon death, thanks to a group of mutants known as the Five. After a long drawn-out conflict with the humans, Krakoa becomes more of a haven for mutants than anyone could have hoped for, unless you're the governments of the world, because of course, conflict still follows the mutants to the island in the form of a looming war between man-made Sentinels and the X-Men. And though readers may have been thinking an island inhabited by mutants might have had its issues plot-wise, it's actually become one of the most iconic X-Men stories in all of Marvel, and is discussed online as being one of the more feasible ways for Marvel to integrate the X-Men into the MCU, whether they go with it or not. At number 2, we have Superior Spider-Man. This storyline really is a long shot. For those who aren't aware, Superior Spider-Man is the version of Spider-Man that's taken on by Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, at least at first. In a massive twist of fate, Doc Ock actually takes over for Peter Parker after his death, and the result is a more advanced version of the hero with retractable arms and a plethora of new gadgets. What's even weirder though is that Doc Ock's mind has been transferred to Peter Parker's body, meaning that he doesn't actually appear as himself when out of the costume. This first takes place in Amazing Spider-Man number 697 and eventually veers into another comic series called Avenging Spider-Man, where Otto continues his run as the web slinger. It's a pretty insane idea to try something like this, but it's actually yielded a really cool version of Spider-Man and even shows us another side to Doc Ock that we surely wouldn't have been introduced to otherwise. Finally, at number 1, we have Watchmen. This now insanely popular comic book series wasn't meant to be a massive success. It started as a 12-part maxi series in 1986, set in an alternate true reality where Nixon is president and New York City is the setting instead of a Gotham or a Metropolis. Except the one catch is that in our world, superheroes are real, with only one of them, Dr. Manhattan, actually having real superpowers. It's a real look at what the world would be like if certain people decided to take on the violent lifestyle of being a vigilante in modern day America. And the result is clearly something that people were interested in. But of course, like anything, it wasn't expected to be quite as big of a hit as it was. The characters were originally going to be pulled from old comics by the discontinued Charlton Comics, giving new life to a group of obscure heroes, but due to copyright issues and other bureaucratic complications, writer Alan Moore and illustrator Dave Gibbons were forced to develop their own characters from scratch, which could have led to the series being a total failure since this adds a lot of extra work and new names might have curbed the interest of diehard DC fans. But it's good that they did it, because in the end, we got Watchmen.
Number 10, Spiders-Man. If you were wondering if I misspoke there, no I did not. Spiders-Man is one of my favorite alternates out there actually, because, well, he's just so creepy. He's definitely a weirdo because he is literally made out of spiders. Ugh. This version of Peter Parker, instead of being bit by a radioactive spider, actually fell into basically like a vat of experimental spiders. As a result, he was consumed by them, and his consciousness manifested within them. Although the real Peter Parker was actually dead and gone, being completely devoured, his mind lived on in the spiders who were connected by his consciousness and came together to create basically a humanoid form. This version of Spider-Man really can never reveal his secret identity, as doing so would reveal that he's actually not a person at all, but just a bunch of spiders all huddled together in the shape of a man. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk about Spider-Man content, I love talking about Spider-Man and all of the Spider-Verse stuff, be sure to check out our Spider-Man playlist. We've got a lot more content over there for you. Number 9, Web Slinger. I love this alternate Spider-Man. While odd, I'd also say he's a pretty cool variant as well. This alternate version of Spider-Man hails from the Wild Wild West. Patrick O'Hara hails from the alternate reality of Earth 31913. He was a traveler who would show off his shooting skills in shows, giving gun presentations. Doc Morbius also traveled along with him. While Patrick would show off his shooting skills along the road, Morbius would sell his elixir. One day, the elixir doused a radioactive spider, and after that spider bit Patrick, he noticed he now had spider-like abilities and powers. Tragically, Morbius began to drink his elixir, which actually turned him into a vampire, forcing the web slinger to track down his once old friend and defeat him. That's what you do to vampires, especially when they're being all creepy and drinking people's blood. Number 8. Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk is a strange one, but is also another favorite of mine from the Spider-Verse. Spider-Punk seems to be one of the alternate versions of Spider-Man that we'll see appearing in Across the Spider-Verse. This version of Spider-Man is not Peter Parker, but instead Hobby Brown, or Hobbert Brown. In this reality, Hobby Brown is a punk rocker who not only possesses spider-like abilities, but also the power of rock. In fact, at one point he actually used his music skills to defeat an alternate version of Venom, cranking up the volume and using an army of amps. Now, of course, this Venom was very different, but still, it's a super cool story. I love it. Number 7. Hand suckers on the hands. If you thought the plasma thing was weird, it only really gets weirder when it comes to Morbius in the Spider-Man animated series. In the animated series, Morbius not only needed plasma instead of just straight up blood to live, but he also had fangs that basically went unused. I know what you're thinking, but wait a minute, Amanda, hold up! Don't vampires feed on their victims using their fangs? Yes, in folklore they're either actually using their fangs to rend the flesh of their victims so they can basically feast on their blood, or in some cases they actually even feed through their fangs using their especially long and pointed incisors like we would a straw. And in some cases, fangs have sort of like venom in them that sort of subdues their victim, depending on, which type of vampire we're talking about from lore. However, in the animated series, while Morbius does have fangs, he doesn't really use them to feast. In that respect, they are more there for visual clarity and effect. Instead, Morbius has tentacle-like suckers on his hands, which is how he feeds. Weird? You betcha. Number 6. Clone Saga. Some people love it, some people hate it, but if you had to collect it or organize it into a trade, all of us were likely confused by it. Even to this day, the Clone Saga remains a hard story to follow because it spanned so many different Spider-Man comics, and because we had so many Spider-Man comics. The Clone Saga is a story where Spider-Man ends up being cloned by his nemesis, the Jackal, and then upon meeting his clones begins to question if he is actually the original Peter Parker or merely a clone himself. A lot of people are not fans of the Clone Saga because of the story's twist at the end, which many felt made the emotional investment that they had put in during the crossover story feel worthless in the end. Number 5. Mutants No More. What would a weirdest things list for Marvel be without me mentioning my extreme dislike of Brotherhood of Evil Mutants originating members Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver being retconned as non-mutants. This all went down in Axis, where it was revealed via a retcon that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver had never truly been mutants or Magneto's children, but were basically tricked into thinking so based on the High Evolutionary experimenting on them when they were young. Once the High Evolutionary was done with them, he discarded them, disguising them genetically as mutants. Wanda found out about this when she attempted to put a blood curse on her relatives, only to discover that it worked on Pietro, but not on Eric. So yes, Eric is not the father, but he still basically was with them the whole time and then was like, by the way, I'm your dad, and now he's not. I think we can still count it, even though they're not blood related, but they should be blood related. It hurts my brain. Number 4. Ultimate Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. One of the weirdest things that we've seen to this day comes from the recesses of the Marvel multiverse. Because of course it does. The Ultimate Universe is the universe of Earth 1610, which was created to be its own world and separate line from the main continuity, focused on making Marvel Comics more accessible to new fans while offering established fans a fresh take on their favorite characters, many of which were either more grounded or gritty or some combination of those two. In the case of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, I definitely say we got something unique, but not in a good way. While Wanda and her brother Pietro have always been close in the 616 continuity, 1610 took this to another level, with the two siblings having an implied romantic relationship. Yeah, not necessarily what we expected or wanted from a fresh take on these characters. Number 3. Vision loves Scarlet Witch because of Ultron? This is a weird theory that some people have in relation to Wanda and Ultron in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The belief here is that Vision, who was made by Ultron, loves Wanda, not necessarily because of his own feelings developing for her, although this does make a lot of sense just because, his character development and that is what happens in the story, but because Ultron himself perhaps had feelings for Wanda. And as crazy as this theory sounds, and perhaps non-foundational as it sounds in relation to what goes on in those movies, the The reality is it could be true, and here is why. In the Ultimate Universe, which serves to inspire much that we see in the MCU, Ultron is in love with Wanda, and it isn't any hidden love either. It's laid out in plain sight. Even weirder, obviously, is that Wanda isn't interested, as she is with her brother at the time, and Wanda's spurning of Ultron is what also apparently helps to turn him into a killer robot. Yeah, it's very different. Very fresh. Number 2. Ruins. The multiverse is full of disturbing realities, but none so disturbing, I don't think, as Ruins. Marvel's Ruins was created by Warren Ellis, with beautifully haunting artwork by Therese and Cliff Nielsen and Chris Moeller. The story that allows us to see into this world is only 2 issues in length, and yet based on the content in here, it does feel much longer. This is because Marvel Ruins is a parody of the Marvel Universe, where Ellis imagines what the heroes and villains would be like in the real world. It's bleak and disturbing, with many superpowers being practically explored in a way that turns them into more of a curse than a blessing. Number 1. Sins Past. Maybe one of the weirdest things in all of the cosmos and across multiple realities actually comes from the main reality of Earth 616. This awful thing has since been retconned away, but it still happened, and you can still go back and read it, and likely be traumatized by reading it upon doing so. That's right, we are talking about Sins Past. In this story, Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn were given added history. Doesn't sound so bad, yeah? Until you learn that this added history involved them being in a relationship together, a secret relationship where Norman got Gwen pregnant and was her first intimate lover. And as a result of their affair, they had 2 twin children who grew up to become goblins themselves. That's all I got. That's it, man. I'm just gonna throw my hands up to that because that's insane. Initially, of their children, Gabriel was known as Grey Goblin, and later on both Sarah and Gabriel will disguise themselves as the villain known as Kindred, which happened more recently in the comics. Don't worry though, we'd later learn that these 2 were actually just unstable clones, as opposed to being the true naturally born children of Gwen and Norman and their love affair, who fortunately were re-retconned as having never been romantically together. Thank goodness. Thank you, Nick Spencer. Thank you for fixing it.
In at 10, Matter Eater Lad. In his first appearance, Matter Eater Lad reveals his origins, sharing that the people of Bismol developed the unique ability to eat all matter as a means of survival when microbes rendered their food inedible. This adaptation granted them incredible strength and durability in his teeth and jaws, enabling him to bite and chew through even the toughest of substances, similar to Superboy Mon-El's abilities. Matter Eater Lad's mother is named Mitz Kem, and his father is Rahl, who surprisingly uses Tenzil's LSH stipend to buy groceries, as depicted in the Hapless Hero in Action Comics number 381, despite both being Bismolians. There was actually a person with this power in real life, if you can believe it. This dude would eat light bulbs and bolts and actually ended up getting eating a whole bike and a whole plane from what I can remember. He was called Mr. Eats All if you want to look him up. In at 9, Flaming Carrot. The legend of the Flaming Carrot begins with a man who, after reading an astonishing 5,000 comics in one sitting to win a bet, suffered brain damage and emerged as the enigmatic hero known as the Flaming Carrot. Somehow. Living in Palookaville, a neighborhood in Iron City, the Carrot has faced off against multiple alien invasions. He's thwarted a communist takeover, encountered flying dead dogs, battled the Man in the Moon, outwitted death itself, and even confronted a cloned army of Hitlers. Devoid of conventional superpowers, the Flaming Carrot relies on unwavering determination, incredible luck, and a unique brand of absurdity to triumph over his adversaries. Despite experiencing death and resurrection, including a detour in Limbo, the Carrot's escapades persist. As a founding member of the Mystery Men, a group of blue-collared superheroes, Flaming Carrot's legacy has endured. Their story was later adapted into the 1999 film Mystery Men and a brief spin-off comic series, but Flaming Carrot doesn't actually appear in that movie. Characters like Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, and Dr. Heller do though, leaving the hero's origins and legend to thrive in their own extraordinary universe. In at 8, Batman Beyond. Amanda Waller, director of Project Cadmus, needed a new Batman to continue the fight for justice, and saw genetic engineering as the solution. She created Project Batman Beyond by using Bruce Wayne's DNA to rewrite a male human's reproductive material, and found a couple in Gotham City with a psychological profile nearly identical to Bruce's parents, the McGinnises. Warren McGinnis was secretly injected with the nanotech solution, and a year later, Terry was born, with half of his mother's genetic material and half of Bruce's. To complete Terry's decision to become a crime fighter, Amanda planned to have that same trauma that inspired Bruce chose to become Batman to happen to Terry. After a night at the theater watching The Grey Ghost Strikes, Amanda and the Phantasm go to Terry's parents to kill them. However, the Phantasm refuses to go along with the plan and allows the McGinnises to escape and be unaware of what might have happened. Terry later on did actually become the new Batman, but hey, having your dad's genetic material rewritten with a crime fighter, yeah, I'm gonna say that that's pretty weird.
Number 7. El Guapo. Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe, but that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions because Robbie doesn't seem to have any real powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with his flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually does have total control over his skateboard. But the problem with that statement is that his skateboard has also acted with a mind of its own, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps it's his own subconsciousness beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true or even explain his ability at all, really. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. It's weird. I don't know what to say. Number 6. Phantom X. When I first read a comic with Phantom X in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really. So now I'm gonna try and explain something to you guys that I do not understand. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or John Philippe, was experimented on by Weapons Plus, and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called Eva. So there's some stuff to break down there. Eva can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used in attacks, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra, quote, personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal himself, and his self-supremacy over his own body and mind allow him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him because of time, but know he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of odor from his own body. Just look into the guy, he's really weird, but he's also really cool. Number 5. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is thousands of years old and is the sister of Genesis, who is the wife of Apocalypse, so fun little fact for you. She is a hardened warrior who respects power and strength like the other mutants of Araco, and her powers kind of reflect that. Iska's power is tychokinesis, which is the power over luck and probability, but specifically, her power means that she cannot lose, or the better way to say it is that she always wins. This includes one-on-one contests, votes, and wagers, but also larger battles where she is a member of a team or an army. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talents she needs to win, or she might just win through, quote, improbable circumstances. So far, it's sounding pretty good. Always winning is so good, it just sounds like ridiculous and lazy writing. It kinda is. But it also means that in larger battles or wars, her powers weigh the probability of the 2 sides and literally make her defect from the losing side and join the winning side, even if the losing side was composed of those she truly cares about, meaning that even though she still technically won, she betrayed her closest friends and allies. Her power has also famously been used against her and one of her allies. When Tarn the Uncaring faced off against Magneto, the mutant Sunspot bet Iska that Tarn would win. So because she would be betting against Tarn, someone she's fought beside for thousands of years, he was actually easily wiped off the face of Mars by Magneto, who crushed his head like a cherry. Her power is really good, it's just got some really crummy loopholes sometimes. Number 4. Adam X. Adam Naramani is honestly quite a bit interesting. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Dekun of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers from Earth. Created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hymopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself trying to say that, you can also say sanguine combustion, which sounds way cooler. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person, so there's a lot of wiggle room here. Thanks to his Shi'ar side of things though, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. Couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws that he has, and Extreme, which is his name, is someone you probably don't want to mess with. Number 3. Tag. I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability, and that to me is hilarious. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allowed him to use a form of telepathy when he touched someone that caused the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they were doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever was, quote, it, then they would dogpile on top of whoever that was. What's strange, other than everything about this, is that he could also control who was affected by the ability, but like how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves, which is just what? In other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. The fun thing about him is he would also always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else or make them it. I don't know, it's weird, but it's really, really cool. Number 2, Korra of the Burning Heart. Can we please just get an applause for literally the coolest name ever? Korra of the Burning Heart is a mutant from Morocco where she served as an assassin and primarily used her power only to boost her own abilities in battle, thanks to the Iraqi being really stubborn, honor-bound fighters or whatever. But Korra's abilities can actually help others as well. Korra's heart is essentially an internalized combustion furnace, which generates life force energy. Thanks to that energy, she can get this really awesome looking flaming skeletal appearance, and she uses this constant energy source to give herself incredible physical capabilities, as well as boost up the powers of others around her to even greater heights. She was a member of the X-Terminators alongside Cable, and she is also part of SWORD. Also, Korra of the Burning Heart. Just wanted to say it again. Number 1. Chamber. Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy that burst from his torso destroyed much of his chest and face. That doesn't sound good, but it turns out that Chamber is literally composed of that same psionic energy, with his body just acting as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, because he is made of energy, he does not eat, drink, or even breathe because he has no organs. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. If he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth. Also, in one story, he's used as literally like a jet engine on a spaceship. It's really weird, but super cool.
At number 10, we have the Korvac Saga. This one is weird in that it's very confusing and sort of bites off more than it can chew. When Michael Korvac comes to the present day, he gains immense power from Galactus' ship and comes to Earth with basically god status. Where he comes from is the confusing part because he claims to have fought the original Guardians of the Galaxy in the year 3000, which gets explained but seems very bizarre considering that's in the future, and there is indeed a present day Guardians of the Galaxy who actually end up fighting Korvac during this conflict. The Avengers then join them in the battle, and well, they all end up getting killed by the godlike villain Michael Korvac. But in a state of grief, Korvac decides to resurrect all the heroes and then kill himself, which is really unexpected and pretty weird. It's a bit of a mind trip, but ultimately ties up as a pretty epic storyline that actually stands the test of time in many ways. At number 9 is The Serpent Crown. This storyline is something that has kind of gone down as an iconic story, but at the time might have been seen as a big risk by writers and readers alike. Partly because it marks the first and last time a cowboy named the Two Gun Kid was part of the Avengers, and partly because it pits the Avengers against the Squadron Sinister, which is basically Marvel's knockoff Justice League. While Kang the Conqueror is searching for the Serpent Crown, he sends the Avengers into an alternate dimension where they have to fight the likes of Hyperion, Nighthawk, Power Princess, Speed Demon, and Dr. Spectrum. Although these characters had already made an appearance by this time, this is one of their bigger features, and anyone would agree that a Justice League knockoff in the world of Marvel seems like a bad idea on paper. But quite to the contrary, a few of the members of Squadron Sinister end up sticking around, like Nighthawk and Hyperion, the latter of which later becomes a member of the Avengers himself. At number 8 is Shadowland. This storyline is one that has been criticized mainly due to the notion that it shows Daredevil doing some pretty bad stuff, which is unlike him. In this storyline, Daredevil basically goes on a power trip and decides that to take down the underground crime ring, The Hand, he has to actually join them. And not only join them, lead them. But after he's possessed by a demonic beast that The Hand worships, he becomes more evil than anticipated, opening a massive prison and tossing basically everyone in it. Basically, the story of Shadowland shows how other heroes are forced to confront Daredevil in his newfound villainy and attempt to bring him back to his senses. The Avengers take on this task and send in the likes of Luke Cage, Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, and Elektra, among others, to try and put a stop to his madness. And although it does seem like a bit of an oddly motivated plot, it has become somewhat iconic just because of the sheer mayhem that ensues when all of these notable forces clash.
In its 7th, Batmite. Batmite was a mischievous imp who appeared as a small childlike man donning an ill-fitting Batman costume with a black lightning bolt symbol. Hailing from another dimension, Batmite possessed nearly limitless magical powers. In his dimension, the resident imps idolized the heroes of Batman's world and would mimic their actions and adventures. Batman happened to be Batmite's favorite hero, obviously, leading to the imp visiting him on multiple occasions, often orchestrating peculiar events just to witness his hero in action. Despite his admiration though, Batmite was more of a bothersome pest than a supervillain, often realizing his actions had upset Batman and then leaving him alone. During his first visit to Earth, Batmite used his magical abilities to enhance Batman and Robin's crime-fighting efforts, albeit causing more trouble than assistance, but Batman eventually requested that Batmite apprehend the criminals himself. After fulfilling Batman's request, the imp complied and departed, vowing to return someday. Batmite did reappear later, this time causing chaos, not only for Batman and Robin, but also for the newly introduced Batwoman. So yeah, I mean, he's an imp, and imps are always shifty, okay? We know that. It's been a thing. In its 6th, Super Batman. When Dr. Wayne and Mrs. Wayne discover a baby named Kal-El in a mysterious spacecraft, they choose to raise him as their own child. They give him the name Bruce and instill him with a deep respect for all individuals regardless of social class or race. Mrs. Wayne, with her nurturing love, cultivates his heart, while Thomas Wayne, though emotionally reserved, proves to be a kind and compassionate father. Recognizing Kal-El's incredible abilities, his speed, agility, and unbreakable bones, Dr. Wayne focuses on pushing Bruce's mental limits rather than his physical ones, since, that's not really an issue. He imparts Bruce with the belief that cowards and bullies resort to violence, but Bruce, as someone exceptional, should aspire to be something higher, something better. Following the tragedy of his parents' death, Bruce withdraws from the world, finding solace in his parents' mansion. Consumed by a profound hatred for violence and death, the haunting images of death torment his sanity. However, one fateful day, a group of robbers invade his home. Bruce, unleashing his powers, brutally attacks them, tearing them apart with his heat vision. It is in this moment that Bruce realizes the potential of his abilities and resolves to utilize his powers for a greater purpose and adopts the identity of Batman, a symbol of justice and protection. So basically, it's if Superman was Bruce Wayne, which is dope as hell. It's from Superman Speeding Bullets, in case you were wondering. Check it out, it's actually really cool. Halfway through into number 5, John Paul Valley. John Paul Valley, also known as Azrael, was a vigilante who once operated in Gotham City. During a short period, he temporarily assumed the mantle of Batman after the original Dark Knight was incapacitated by Bane. However, his time as Batman was marred by a descent into insanity, leading to dire consequences. As Batman, John Paul succumbed to the darkness within himself, unleashing a brutal and merciless brand of justice justice upon minor criminals. He inflicted permanent damage to his adversaries, leaving them crippled and beyond recovery, and one such instance was when he ruthlessly assaulted the Tallyman, mistaking him for the original Batman and retaliating for an attempted assassination. In his tumultuous tenure as Batman, John Paul also thwarted the Trigger twins during a train heist and confronted Mr. Freeze at the Gotham morgue. These confrontations further showcased his unpredictable and aggressive nature as he struggled to maintain control over his actions. Ultimately, John Paul's time as Batman came to an end as he was forcibly removed from the role, but he returned to his original identity as Azrael. His tenure as Dark Knight serves as a cautionary tale, but also he went insane and started seeing Batmite, but not the real Batmite. It's a whole other thing. It's weird. Man, it's weird. And at 4, Vampire Batman. As Batman investigates a series of gruesome deaths in Gotham City, only to discover that the killer is none other than Dracula, the legendary vampire. Not even a joke, actually a thing. Batman teams up with a rogue vampire named Tanya to stop Dracula and his brood from terrorizing the city, but to do so, Tanya provides Batman with a blood substitute after turning him into a vampire to spare him from the cycle of death and killing that comes with being bitten, because you have to drink blood in order to keep living, so they give him a blood substitute to kind of stop that so he has it inside himself. And in order to destroy Dracula's minions, Batman lures them into the Batcave where Tanya and his followers engage them in combat. Batman detonates multiple explosives in the cave, destroying the Wayne Manor and exposing the cave to sunlight, which ultimately kills all the vampires within it. Batman then confronts Dracula on his own and impales the vampire lord on a tree that has been struck by lightning, because this is supernatural and you need something more than just chopping their heads off. This act, however, comes at the cost of Batman's humanity as Dracula drains the last of his blood. Nevertheless, Batman assured his friend Alfred that he had nothing to fear, because as Batman with new vampiric powers, he will live on forever. But I'm pretty sure that this doesn't go well, and I'm pretty sure he tries to take over the world. Don't quote me on that, but if you want to know for yourself, check out Batman and Dracula Red Reign. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Elliot Ness. Elliot Ness, a dedicated federal agent, was entrusted with the formidable task of dismantling the criminal empire of Al Capone during the era of Prohibition in Chicago. And this is also a real thing. This actually happened. But in this story, he was leading a team comprising of Danny Rasher, Frank Basil, and George Kochen. They became renowned as the Untouchables, earning the moniker bestowed upon them by the press. Despite their unwavering determination, they found themselves constantly constrained by legal limitations in their pursuit of justice. Driven by an unyielding desire to rid the city of crime, though, Ness eventually adopted a clandestine alter ego and transformed into the Batman. Operating under the cover of darkness, his vigilante persona straddled the fine line between law enforcement and vigilantism. This dual role allowed him to operate outside of the confines of the law, using unconventional means to bring down the criminals who eluded traditional justice. But since he was actually a federal agent, he was able to, do things enough so that they couldn't just say, hey, he's a vigilante, this doesn't count. Elliot Ness, the federal agent turned into a masked crusader, undertook the mantle of Batman to confront the criminal underworld both within and outside the boundaries of the law, embodying a symbol of unwavering justice, but who also hunts Kronos with Dean Winchester on the weekends. But ultimately, in at number 2, Zur-En-Arrh. The enigmatic phrase Zur-En-Arrh began appearing throughout the streets and dark alleys of Gotham City, often accompanying Batman's encounters with criminals like the Joker. As time passed, the phrase continued to manifest, typically as graffiti in the background, until one fateful encounter with the Black Glove, who shattered Batman's mind. Nefarious leader Simon Hurt exploited a deep-seated psychological trauma within Batman, triggering a mental breakdown. In the wake of this devastating event, it was unveiled that Batman had constructed a backup personality dormant within his subconscious for years, awaiting the activation code Zur-En-Arrh. This alternate persona transformed Bruce into a deranged Batman that called himself Zur-En-Arrh, which is a twisted reflection of his former self. Empowered by the persona of Zur-En-Arrh, Batman confronted the Black Glove at Arkham Asylum, where they sought to wager his life in a treacherous gambling game. He also faced off against the Joker, but despite his valiant efforts, he ultimately succumbed to defeat, entombed alive within the asylum's graveyard. That's so messed up. That's insane, dude. God. And finally, in at number 1, Lovecraft Batman. After witnessing the brutal death of his parents during childhood, Bruce Wayne embarked on a relentless quest spanning 2 decades to unravel the mysteries of criminal behavior. However, everything takes a dramatic turn when he, along with his trusted companions, venture to the Antarctic in search of an expedition team led by the eccentric socialite Oswald Cobblepot. What awaits Bruce in this frozen realm, though, is a peculiar sight. Cobblepot wandering alone in the icy wilderness, while one of his crewmen, Grendon, had transformed into a lifeless yet animated corpse, unearthing a creature trapped within the frozen depths. Driven by the sense of duty, Bruce sees the opportunity to bring Grendon and the unearthed creature back to Gotham under his custody. However, as the backdrop of the crime-ridden roaring 20s sets the stage, Bruce becomes entangled in a web of connections that link Gotham's dark past to his own father, his parents' death, and a slain scientist named Kirk Longstrom, who possesses the ability to communicate with bats. Through his investigations, Bruce discovers that he alone possesses the power to thwart the sinister cult of Ghoul, who seek to bring out the demise of Gotham and the world itself. Basically, this is Lovecraft Batman, okay? Think Cthulhu but Batman, and that's what you get.